Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
Free education. So we will go ahead and open that hearing up. And I'd like to call forward the sponsor of the bill, Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Representative Holt from the Council, and John Martin. The bill before you changes what was changed in the 2010 timeframe. Why would we want to? Why would we want to say compulsory attendance should end at 16 versus 18, right? We need an education. The unintended consequence of having passed this law is you've got students that are teenagers that in some cases are stronger than the teachers and have no interest in being in school, who then become disruptive for those who want to learn. Not everybody wants to learn. I wish that was the case. Education is incredibly valuable. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about when you force someone to be in a classroom, okay, when they could be out earning a living, and they don't want to be there, they tend to be disruptive to the rest of the classroom. And that is something that should be fixed. We spend a lot of dollars and time chasing those students who at that age in their life aren't ready to learn or have chosen not to learn. That time and energy will be better spent, okay, working with the kids who want to get ahead, who want to get ready for college, who want to continue to learn. So the language is simple. It undoes what was done in 2010. I would argue that if you guys want to, it's not grammatically clear. For those who are really clear about grammatical stuff, in line 7, in particular in line 18, I believe it should say at least 6 years of age and 16 and under, as opposed to under 16, because under 16 isn't clear whether it's 15 or 16. It should be 16 and under. My intent is not to drop this to 15 in any sense. It is clearly to change the law back to those between the ages of 16, 6 and 16 inclusive, okay, are where the compulsory attendance statutes apply, okay, and the ages of 17 and 18 are where they do not. And with that, I'll close my testimony unless there's questions.
Are there any questions? Yes, Representative Alvin.
Okay, well, thank you for testifying in front of our committee. Welcome to education.
Thank you.
Would you believe that I am on the dropout oversight committee, and we study each one of the school districts,
Okay.
and we see firsthand the impact of the law raising the age to 18.
Okay.
Every school district that we looked at had some kind of alternative work-study program, sending kids up to centers of excellence so that they could learn college courses while they were still technically in high school. There was always a program that would keep these kids engaged. And from my standpoint, it was good to keep these kids engaged. If they did want to go out and make a living, like I said, there were work-study programs where they could get credit for actually going to work. So I don't see where this benefits any student. And right now, it looks like the 18-year-old dropout rate is actually working, and it's actually keeping those kids engaged that would normally be home watching Wheel of Fortune. Okay? So I can't see any reason to go backwards to when we had a 16-year-old dropout rate. That's just my opinion. Do you believe
And if I may answer a would you believe question, thank you, Representative Falcon. It's good that there are other options, okay? Because when you get to be 17 or 18 and learning in a classroom, potentially learning, let's say, advanced algebra or trigonometry is just not where you are in life, or academically you're not prepared to manage that. Some of the upper sciences and foreign languages, getting out and learning to be a machinist in a work-study program is a great option, right? And I'm glad that those options exist. It is important. Not everybody will excel in life academically. Some people are going to take an alternate route and build a career based on shop skills, for instance, a machinist, right? You need basic math, but you don't need much more than basic math. You need to be able to say, oh yes, that cutting bit is not cutting correctly anymore. I'm going to turn the milling center off and I'm going to actually change the bit because I don't like the surface finish. Those things are not necessarily learned in school. They may be learned in a vocab type school, but a lot of that is on the job training. So giving those over the age of 16, right, 17 and 18-year-olds, the ability to go out and start earning a living because that's their preferred career path, even if it's landscaping. I pick on landscapers, no disrespect to landscapers, but if you want to go out and earn a living landscaping, you start a landscaping company and you then employ lots of other people, that's a prosperous career. There's the spouse of our U.S. Senator, I believe, runs a landscaping business. No disrespect to landscaping businesses, right? These are jobs that need to be performed in society. You're not going to learn how to cut grass in the classroom.
Further questions? Not seeing hands. Thank you very much. Invite Representative Danisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Representative Dan Itza. I represent Rockingham County District 10. I do rise in support of this bill. I didn't support the change from 16 to 18 when it was made 6 years ago, I believe. Of course, our dropout rate has reduced. Nobody's allowed to drop out. I mean, that's kind of like being surprised that Saddam Hussein got 100% of the vote in Iraq. I believe that the current statutory construct burdens the system with students who don't want to be there. One of the things we had to do when we created this current system is create a whole new construct of alternative education that works just like an IEP. And if you understand how an IEP works, it is a very costly approach to education. Now, it may be necessary in certain cases. My son has an IEP because of his physical condition. But to prescribe that for individuals who simply don't want to be in the classroom does everybody a disservice. And I don't think it's necessary in order to provide the alternative paths. We had vocational technical schools before we had mandatory attendance through age 18. And people went all the way through. Nobody could just simply drop out. That's a fallacy. You had the student had to want to drop out, the parents had to concur, and the district superintendent had to concur. So it wasn't just an hasta la vista baby, I'm out of here. You had to go through a process and get permission to drop out. And I would presume that that permission was given because it was better for the other students who wanted to be there, that individual was no longer in the classroom. I guess I'm finished, and I'll take some questions.
Representative Moore.
Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In connection to Representative Balcom's last question, so just to clarify, so this is not only just a benefit for the person, the student who would like to drop out earlier, right? This is also a benefit for those in the class where the child or student may be disruptive because they don't want to be there and to help out the other students. Is that correct?
That is true. The other thing that happened when we created the alternative education is that the alternative education can be implemented between the student and the superintendent over the best intentions of the parent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions? Representative Grenier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be quick. And thank you for taking my question. If one buys into this idea, and I must say, I'm not alien to it, but would it be agreeable to you that if this person were to leave at 16, that there must be a secondary plan? I say must be, such as GED activity or night school or something else to try to encourage something more, not at the expense of the school, but at the requesting student to leave, something that they had to buy into as well. Would that still be philosophically in line with this?
Philosophically, yes. I'm not sure how you would impose it. because once the student is out of the school, I'm not sure how you make, right, I guess then you bring them back into school if they aren't sufficiently interested in education to get a GED. I'm not sure what purpose that serves. Or you put them in chins. I don't know that that isn't necessarily an efficacious route to take. But I mean, we all want everybody to obtain the level of education that is appropriate to their life plan. But we also have a situation in our society, and you know, I have a master's degree in chemical engineering, but we have a fixation on college education, and we have a deficit in what's traditionally been called skilled labor, machinists, pipe fitters, those professions are not without education. That was one of the things I learned in my first field service training. I went down to a power plant in Louisiana and was amazed at how much education a pipe fitter or an electrician goes through to obtain their license. I mean, they go to night school just as if they were getting an associate's in engineering. But they'd be able to do that with a GED or just with journeying under a master for a while.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Representative Bell.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Representative Vinci. I know that you're involved in homeschooling.
Yes.
If somebody doesn't want to actually be physically in the classroom, why can't the parents homeschool technically that?
They could. That is a viable option, absolutely. Again, doing that prescriptively could be difficult because you have to have the buy-in of the parent as well as the buy-in of the student. And I'll tell you right now, a student who has not been homeschooled from the get-go has a very difficult time acclimating to homeschooling. My oldest son was in traditional education until grade 3. My younger daughter only for about 6 months up here, and you know, through part of first grade, and then the other two that we homeschooled from the get-go. The difference in getting them to work was marked. The longer they were in public school, the harder it was to get them to work.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you very much, Representative. The next person we'll call forward is Carl Ladd.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Carl Ladd with the New Hampshire School Administrators Association, and the association is adamantly opposed to this bill. I will say that when this bill was initially introduced years ago to raise the age from 16 to 18, I was adamantly opposed to that at the time. As a former high school administrator and a superintendent dealing with a myriad of issues. But I've seen firsthand what has happened since we have done that. We've been able to take students who would have been dropouts and help provide them with a pathway so that they could get their high school diploma, so they could enter the military, so that they could get their GED, so they could enter the military, so that they could go on to community college, so that they could go on and become productive citizens and members of our community. I hope that we remember the dropout data that we had prior to the increase. We had a high dropout rate in the state. We had a number of students who were just considered to be throwaways when they became difficult in the classroom. The superintendent currently does have the authority to authorize an alternative plan for those students who simply do not want to be in the school. I've authorized them as a superintendent for those students who just did not work. We've also created a number of alternative education programs in every school district in the state to try to address the needs of each individual student. And truly, the development of this increased enrollment aid has fueled the whole competency movement, which I think is absolutely essential for us to have a high-quality 21st century education. I think a more appropriate discussion might be to develop an apprenticeship model for the state based on the European model, where we truly do create an apprenticeship track for those students that the former representatives were speaking about, and I would certainly be in support of that. I'll close my testimony, sir, and open it up for questions.
Thank you very much. Representative Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. You said that you saw those students go on to a different pathway that remained in school. How did you know that they didn't want to be in school when they get to be 16? Do you have some kind of statistical information or some kind of a survey that goes around to all the 16-year-olds saying, do you want to quit school? How do you get that, those statistics? Please.
There are no statistical measures that we're going to determine whether or not students are going to stay in school. But as the representative spoke earlier, there is a core group of students who tend to not like the regular curriculum. Square pegs in round holes, if you will. They may not be successful in junior high and in freshman and sophomore years. So they would be more than likely the type of student that we would have seen as a dropout. So instead of allowing them to just simply drop out, we have provided alternative educational programs for them so that they can go on and be successful. There is no metric. We do not go around and survey students and say, do you want to drop out? It's sort of like saying, asking kids, do you want to be here or do you want to be home watching television or watching Wheel of Fortune?
Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So in our district, we have an alternative, I'd say, certificate program. Instead of receiving the full high school diploma, you get this alternative, and it does seem to be right what you were kind of referencing, about 15 to 20 kids per year. They're typically kind of identified somewhere around 7th or 8th grade as being more resistant learners. Is this a common thing that other places in the state have? Like when we were talking about pathways to graduation earlier, are a lot of schools offering things like this, or is it sporadic around the state?
No, I think it's uniform throughout the state that schools are offering alternative educational plans. I know in the North Country that was the impetus behind the formation of the North Country Charter Academy initially, which all the superintendents in the North Country worked to develop. And then for those students who were still not successful in the Charter Academy, the local school districts then developed additional programs to tailor their individual needs to help them be successful. So it is not just isolated to one district or another.
Thank you. This committee, 7 years ago or so, we dealt with alternative education and just went in the direction that you just indicated that you're doing. I'm glad to see that happening. Further questions, Representative Bertrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try to pose this as a question because I was the director of the Dover Adult Learning Center for 9 years, and I, like you, when this law was changed to 18, thought, oh my goodness, there goes my job. Because we had lots of people coming back to get their GED after a few years out of high school. What I saw, and maybe you can speak to how much the GED or now the equivalent HiSET is being used within the high schools now to keep high students involved and engaged and give them the opportunity to graduate without having to go through the regular high school program. That's just one example in my mind of the kind of creativity that this law generated.
I think that's a great question. The HiSET has been used and expanded within all of the schools of which I'm familiar. It used to be that the GED, and when it was the GED, was given regionally, and you had to go to classes, and it wasn't offered usually in the school unless the school was quite large. Now we have HiSET instructors in just about every high school, so that we can provide this alternative pathway for those students who it really benefits. I know that in a district in the North Country, there is an adult diploma program that is funded by the school district it was initially began for dropouts, and now it has been expanded to include students, high school students who simply can't succeed anywhere else. So we're finding pathways for them to be successful, and I will say that most of those students who graduated from there have gone on to community college or have joined the military.
Thank you. Not seeing any further hands. Thank you very much. I'd like to call forward Dean Richner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean Richner with the School Boards Association. Here to oppose this bill. NHSBA worked with Governor Lynch and legislators on passage, I think it was Senate Bill 18, that raised the compulsory age from 16 to 18. And we agree with the comments that Representative Falcom, Representative Wolf, Dr. Ladd have made. School districts have many and varied approaches to supporting at-risk youth and have accomplished marked success in increasing graduation rates. The point is all the districts are working toward providing some education that's important for all subsequent endeavors. I'll just close by noting that the School Boards Association first adopted a resolution in 2006 and have continued to endorse this resolution and keeping it adopted. And it simply states, NHSBA supports a compulsory attendance age of 18 along with the flexibility to utilize alternative options that allow students to continue a program of study to complete their high school education. And with that, I'll close my comment.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Representative Brandon.
Thank you. My question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's late in the day. Thank you for taking my question. If we know that no matter what we do, a parent can pull their kid out and say homeschool, we just know that. And my concern here is when you say there are alternate programs to keep them learning, and that's kind of a trade-off in class. Are they, how shall we say this, available by choice of the parent and student? In other words, can they motivate it, or is there somewhat of a selection process? That is my concern, because if they can't get resolved, then, and I know of these cases, okay, we're homeschooling, and in some cases it turns out to be no schooling, and that troubles me.
Alternative programs are worked out in cooperation with the parent and the superintendent.
Okay. So
the answer is yes.
Just a quick
Simply
follow-up. So it can be proactive? It
Yes.
can be proactive from the parent?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Not seeing any hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next person is Michelle Lavelle.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Michelle Lavelle. I represent New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, a school choice for New Hampshire. I'll keep my remarks very brief. It's my understanding that the intent of the bill is to apply essentially just to 17-year-olds, so that the compulsory age is inclusive of 16-year-olds. So we're just talking 17-year-olds who would have that additional flexibility, and this does nothing to remove the alternative programs that have already been so successful. It's for those where there still isn't that fit, where perhaps they want to pursue their own business or a trade school or some other mentoring path. But it's just for that small segment where it's still not a good fit, but it's just for that handful of segment. I'd like to give you a copy of my official written testimony, but I think what's actually even more helpful is an article I have from the U.S. Department of Education from their report dated December 2013. And I marked up a couple of their summary pages in highlighter to make it a little easier to read through the 29 pages. What they talk about is essentially what we've already heard here today. It's the alternative programs that are successful, not the age limit. The age limit in and of itself is not what does the trick. It's having those support programs, and I think those things would all stay in place. It's the age. And so I'd just like for you to consider what the US DOE even has to say on that matter. There was interview on NPR between our own New Hampshire Deputy Commissioner Paul Leather and a gentleman by the name of, I'm sorry, blanking, but again, it talks about that higher age limit isn't the golden key that fixes it, it's the support programs. So just for your consideration.
Are there any questions? Yes, Representative Hirschman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question would be, do you think those support programs that are now currently in place and so successful that began after we raised the age would be in place had we not raised the age?
I think they could have happened independent of that age being raised.
Could have,
Yeah.
but didn't for many years.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next person is Ian Freeman.
Good afternoon. I'm Ian Freeman from Keene, one of the co-chairmen of the New Hampshire Liberty Party. I'm calling to support I'm here to support this bill, but I don't think it goes far enough. Teenagers are young people, and they, would like to be, many of them would like to be adults. And a lot of the laws that we have, labor laws and these educational laws, are forcing them to do things against their will. And that's one of the points I wanted to make here, was that if your education system is so great, then you shouldn't have to force people to attend. If it's truly a wonderful thing to go to these government schools, then you shouldn't have to threaten someone with, potential jail sentence if they don't want to go to the schools. And ultimately, that's what backs up the compulsory in your compulsory education. So I fully support this bill. Again, if you guys have a good system, then people will see that, they'll value it, and they'll attend on a consensual basis rather than being under the threat of the government. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Representative Belton.
Yeah, as far as I recall, at age 17, you're still a minor. So are you proposing that that we let minors decide when they want to drop out of school or not? I mean, at what age would you think that somebody is capable of saying, oh, I don't feel like going to school anymore, I'm wasting my time?
I would say that anyone at any age who decides to make that choice for themselves should be able to feel whatever the consequences are of it. And I think that goes further than what we're discussing here, to the idea of emancipation. Some states have emancipation at age 16, where a young person who, let's say they're in an undesirable situation for whatever reason. I knew a young lady who was she was staying at a motel that her parents owned that had a lot of heroin addicts and crackheads around. Not exactly the most healthy environment to be growing up in. She would have liked to have left that situation, but the law forces her to be with her parents because, well, that's just what the law is. She can't go through any kind of process to emancipate herself from that situation. So yes, I think that people should be able to make those choices. Obviously, some people will choose, and they'll choose wrongly, but ultimately they'll feel the consequences for that, and they'll probably end up coming home in that case.
Thank you. Further questions? Not seeing any hands. Thank you very much. And we have no more cards on this particular bill. This hearing is closed.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.